InfoPlus for genuine information.
Hello and namaste to all the viewers, and welcome to another compelling episode of Global Conversation. I'm your host, Rebecca Chetri, and today we have a truly distinguished guest joining us. We are honored to have with us the Australian ambassador to Nepal, Felicity Volk, but many may not know that she's a novelist. Welcome to the show. Today, we are privileged to host Her Excellency Felicity Volk, Ambassador of Australia to Nepal. In 1988, Volk completed her Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Laws honors degree with a major in English literature at the University of Queensland. She was awarded the university's 40th Memorable Medal for Poetry in 1987. Her short stories and novels have won awards, including the Fellowship of Australian Writers. The Australian Women's Weekly Penguin Short Story Award 2006 and the Carmel Bird Long Short Story Award 2013. Her debut novel Lightning, published in 2013, won the Fellowship of Australian Writers Barbara Ramsden Award 2013 and many more. Ambassador Felicity Volk is a career diplomat with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. She has been instrumental in fostering and strengthening the relationship between Australia and Nepal. With a wealth of experience and a deep commitment to enhancing bilateral ties, Ambassador Volk brings invaluable insights into the dynamic relationship between these two nations. In today's interview, we explore the various initiatives led by the Australian Embassy in Nepal, delve into the cultural and educational exchanges that enrich both countries, and discuss the future prospects of this important bilateral relationship. We'll also touch upon the ambassador's personal experiences and her vision for continuing to build strong and lasting connections between Australia and Nepal. Stay tuned for an engaging and enlightening conversation that promises to shed light on the nuances of international diplomacy and the unique bond shared by Australia and Nepal. Let's dive right in. Namaste, Your Excellency.
Namaste.
You are quite familiar face to our viewers, and it's been quite a few times that you have given interview to Himalayan Television. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I'm so delighted that shortly before I finish my posting, I have a chance to be with you and to give one more interview with Himalayan Television.
Your Excellency, you have been an Australian ambassador to Nepal for over 3 years. You must have witnessed many ups and downs during your tenure. And how would you like to review your tenure and how have been your experience so far as an ambassador to Nepal? And how have these experiences shaped your approach to diplomacy?
Well, thank you for the question. In fact, I arrived here in quite a difficult time. It was the middle of COVID. So I turned up here in January of 2021. Kathmandu went almost immediately into lockdowns. And so it was a very quiet start to my diplomatic tenure, but it was also a time when clearly the country was being challenged and the people of Nepal were being challenged. And so I was very keen to make sure Australia provided great support to Nepal and to Nepalis. And so we arranged for around $7 million of emergency humanitarian assistance. And that kind of set the tone for my entire 3.5 years here as a diplomat and shaped my approach to diplomacy here, which was always to look at our relationship with Nepal as a very strong partnership where we support each other through the good times and through the bad times, and always looking for opportunities to address what issues are particularly important for Nepali people, to make sure our development program responded to those, and to make sure that we were providing whatever support was required.
You have visited so many places here in Nepal and have interacted with people from different communities, from different diversified communities. What are the setbacks for Nepal to graduate countries from developing to developed status? What is your views on that, Your Excellency?
Well, my view is that Nepal has immense potential, and I think it's precisely what you've identified, the fact that there is so much diversity in this country. There are so many different ethnicities, such rich cultural, spiritual traditions, such rich practice artistically, musically. There is so much richness in the country, and this is the foundation for Nepal. But there are immense challenges as well, and these challenges come in terms of a vulnerability to natural disaster. It comes in terms of Nepal's unique placement between two very powerful neighbours and the challenges of geopolitics. But it also comes in terms of domestic politics, and at the moment we're seeing quite a lot of domestic political instability, another change of government in train. And so I think it's very difficult for good policy to be developed and implemented here to support the development aspirations of Nepali people without stability. And so my hope for the country is that there will be political stability as a foundation for good governance, as a foundation for good development practice.
Nepal is a beautiful place, but still the youth of Nepal are not willing to step back in their countries. What is your observation on this?
Well, two things. I think regardless of the condition of any country, whether that's Nepal or Australia, youth of today are increasingly focused on opportunities to live a globalised life. They see opportunity in other countries. They're interested in travelling. They're interested in working overseas. That means Nepalis coming to Australia or the UK or the US or elsewhere. It also means Australians travelling and wanting to work in the US, the UK, and even here in Nepal. So there is a natural trend towards moving, being fluid, working across international borders. But secondly, I think in Nepal there's a particular issue around opportunity in terms of high quality education and in terms of employment opportunity. And again, those opportunities will be more dominant once there is political stability. So I think for Nepalis, there will be a natural inclination to travel, to get experiences in a country like Australia, whether that is study or work. But I would love to see more Nepalis coming back to Nepal, contributing to the country's development, looking for opportunities here, grabbing them with both hands, because that will make a more prosperous and stable and secure Nepal.
Your Excellency, Nepal and Australia recently signed the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, TIFA. How would TIFA help improve Nepal to Australia trade relations, and how do you think that will benefit Nepal in coming years?
Well, at the moment, there is a significant trade imbalance in our bilateral commercial relationship, and this is largely driven by the education sector. We have such a large number of Nepalis travelling to Australia for study that our export in education services have contributed to a significant trade imbalance. And this is something Australia is keen to address. And this is why, after our Assistant Foreign Minister visited in May of last year, he made a priority having a trade and investment framework arrangement, or TIFA as we call it, progress through the Australian bureaucracy, signed off, and in fact when former Foreign Minister Saud visited Australia in February of this year, the two sides signed the TIFA, and that now sets in place a mechanism for conversations around improving trade opportunities, identifying where there are hindrances, and looking towards new sectors where we can promote more trade and especially more exports from Nepal to Australia to bring that balance into play, so that both countries are benefiting equally from a very strong, very robust trading relationship.
As we know, Your Excellency, you're also a novelist, and you have written few books already. Before coming to Nepal, what book did you read to understand Nepal in a better way? And what did you love the most?
So I read quite extensively about Nepal before I came here. You're talking about books I read for about Nepal, yes. So I read about history, I read about culture, I read about spirituality and spiritual tradition. A book that I particularly liked was called Living Goddess by Isabella Tree. It was a weave of Nepal's history, its politics, its culture and its spirituality all into one book. Fascinating reading. I also read fiction because that is what I write myself. You asked me to bring my books. So these are the two books that I've written, Design Lines and Lightning. And they're two novels that I wrote between 2013 was when my first novel was published. 2020 was when my second novel was published. I'm a great lover of fiction, of literature, and so when I was reading for my time here in Nepal, I read fiction as well. I read short stories such as Arresting God in Kathmandu. I've read the novel that was recently released, The Woman Who Climbed Trees. Both beautiful depictions of the richness of cultural life here in Nepal and great storytelling.
What did you like the most about Nepal?
About Nepal, the whole country?
Yeah, after reading those kind of books, you know?
Well, I think for me, the thing I love most about Nepal and what was very evident in these books is the richness of Nepal's cultural practices, those deep ancient traditions that we see every day through pujas in the morning, pujas in the evening, the way all of Nepal's people, whatever their ethnicity, whatever their religious practice, they live their faith, they live their cultural practice. So festivals in Bhaktapur, festivals in Kathmandu, and also in Patan. I have thoroughly enjoyed immersing myself in cultural practice here.
Recently, Nepal to Australia Parliamentary Friendship Group and the Australian Embassy Business Advisory Group have been formed. How will that help to improve the trade relationship between Australia and Nepal?
Well, I'll start with the Australian Embassy Business Advisory Group. We stood up this group of Nepali business people who have connections to Australia, an expert group who could provide advice to us about areas where they felt there were more opportunities and areas where there are challenges, so that it's easier for these opportunities to be harvested and the challenges to be addressed through government-to-government connections under the TIFA that we've spoken about. They're a great group of people. They're passionate, they're energetic, and they already are working across multiple sectors, whether that be education, wine imports, exports of products, handicrafts, and other products to Australia, people who have interests in hydroelectricity. So they're providing very valuable advice to inform the business relationship. With the Parliamentary Friendship Group, the committee that was formed during the visit by our Speaker of our Australian Parliament and a delegation from the Australian Parliament, that committee will activate so that they can promote parliamentary to parliamentary engagement, including around legislation, including around understanding federal system of government, ways we can support each other at the parliament to parliament level.
Education is a significant aspect of the relationship between Nepal and Australia. My viewers would like to know about the recent cut down the number of international students. How does Australia government see the situation at present?
Well, the changes to our migration strategy and a review of migration were really generated by recognition that Australia's population was growing at such a fast rate because of what we call net overseas migration, that it was putting immense pressure on accommodation and infrastructure, work opportunities, all of which have an impact on our international students. And so it was important that measures were taken to, for the time being, try to even out net overseas migration. A year ago, we added around 518,000 people to our population. Our population is around 27 million. So more than 500,000 people came to our country in 1 year, made Australia their home, which does put a lot of pressure on all of the infrastructure, on housing, on rental opportunities. Now, a lot of that net overseas migration was driven by international students who studied in Australia, stayed on to work in Australia and became Australian citizens, which we welcome. We love the fact that we have such a rich multicultural society. But we also have to make sure that when people come to the country, including international students, that they're able to find accommodation, that they're not finding difficulty with rent, that they're not struggling to find jobs to support themselves. And so these measures that are in place are a way of bringing more balance. They're a way of bringing more integrity into the international education experience. So they're a way of supporting a quality student experience as well as quality students coming to Australia.
The students who goes for the further education from Nepal to Australia are well qualified and usually they complete all the requirement documents, isn't it? The IELTS, the financial requirement documents and all. Isn't that enough for the students?
Listen, I appreciate that most students who apply for an education experience in Australia provide high quality documentation. They have good academic qualifications. They are obviously quality students, but not everyone is. And unfortunately, there are situations where students, not just from Nepal, but from every country, will apply with inadequate documentation. They won't have sufficient English language to have a good education experience, and maybe they are not planning to go to a quality Australian institution. So there is a need always to be vigilant around the agents that students apply to, the quality of documentation, making sure that all of the documentation that's provided is bona fide, making sure that they have the appropriate English language qualifications. So I would encourage any potential applicants to make sure they keep this in mind. But I also have to underscore that while we have so many high quality institutions in Australia, like every country, there are a small number of institutions that are in fact not necessarily set up for education, but are set up as a pathway into employment. And so again, we're trying to make sure that all of the institutions in Australia that are reaching out to international student applicants are of the highest quality, and these measures that we've been talking about are also set up to ensure the integrity of the student experience in Australia.
Australia has tightened visa rules for international students amid rising migration. The stricter regulations announced are part of efforts to manage international students' influx. Bill was introduced in Parliament by Education Minister Jason Clear, and it seems that they want to reduce the net annual migration in 2025 to 60,000. However, higher education and immigration experts have criticized this plan. Can you please enlighten my viewers on this regard, Your Excellency?
Well, as I said earlier, the issue that our Minister for Education and our Minister for Immigration have been seeking to address is the issue around the really difficult impacts on infrastructure of rapidly expanding net overseas migration. And as I said, it was over 500,000 in 1 year. And as a proportion of our population, we simply cannot provide the sort of infrastructure to such a large number of people coming into Australia every year. And part of that group are international students. And so the measures that have been introduced are a mix of both trying to even out and make more regular the flow of migrants to Australia, but also to ensure the quality of the student experience, the quality of international education sector in Australia, so that when a Nepali student comes to Australia, they know that they can find accommodation. They know that the institution they're going to is going to give them a really quality education experience. They know that they can find employment to support themselves while they're in Australia. All of those make for a very positive experience, and that's what we want to offer students from Nepal, students from the region, students from around the world.
Language proficiency, financial requirements, and education intent are other major factors which has been told by officials. What will be the impact for those students who still would like to pursue further education in Australia?
Well, for any quality student, there will be no real change to what their experience of the application process will be. But the points you've highlighted are important ones. It is important that every student who goes to Australia has a good command of English, because without that, they won't be able to complete their course. So there is that issue that's being addressed. There are also general issues around ensuring that the students who apply to go to Australia are genuinely students, that they pass what's called the genuine student test, that they've demonstrated how their study plans in Australia apply to their professional plans in Nepal. So those are the sorts of issues that are being addressed in the new policy.
How would you describe the current state of diplomatic relations between Australia and Nepal? And are there any significant initiatives in place to further strengthen the ties between two nations in coming days?
Well, thank you. Yeah, 64 years of diplomatic relations, and we are seeing the bilateral relationship go from strength to strength.
Exactly.
Now, I came here, as I said, in the middle of COVID. It was a time when global travel had been stopped, when everyone was hunkered down, not much was happening in any field. But since that time, over the last 2.5 years, I've seen our relationship absolutely thrive. It thrives because we have a very strong human bridge between our countries. At the moment, there are almost 180,000 Nepalis who have made Australia their permanent home. This makes Nepal our fastest growing migrant community and our 9th largest migrant community. The Nepali language is the 3rd most commonly spoken language in Canberra, in our nation's capital. So these ties between people to people are enormous, they're strong, and they're growing at a rapid rate. And this underpins the strength of the relationship. But we've also had very fast movement in government-to-government terms. So last year, having had decades without a ministerial visit, last year we had our Assistant Foreign Minister visit in May. He spent time here in Nepal. He witnessed the incredibly vibrant cultural life of Nepal. He saw opportunities in the education sector and in trade. He met with our alumni, Nepalis who've come back to contribute to the country. Great visit. A few months later, we had a visit by a parliamentary delegation led by our Speaker. We've signed the TIFA. All of these underpin a rapidly growing relationship.
Australia has been a key development partner to Nepal. Could you please highlight some of the projects or programs that Australia is currently supporting in Nepal?
Sure. There are three key strands I'd like to talk about. And this is out of the development program that annually is around $27 million. And so our flagship development program is called Subnational Governance Program. It's implemented through the Asia Foundation and it's implemented across the country, and it focuses on the rollout of federalism because the Nepal government has made very clear to us that their key priority is developing good governance across the three tiers of government. And without that foundation of good governance, of a clarification of responsibilities between the three tiers of government, no other development activity can occur. So that's where we invest a lot of time and attention. Secondly, climate change. We are, of course, like Nepal, very concerned about the global impacts of climate change. And so this is a particularly vulnerable part of the world, the third pole. And so we're working with a partner, ICIMOD, on climate resilience activities. We work with the Disaster Management Authority, NDRRMA, on disaster preparedness. We're working on early warning systems for landslides and floods. We're working on developing forest fire management. And we're working on nature-based solutions and livelihoods development for people affected by climate change. And then the third key area is social inclusion with a focus on gender equality. So all of our programming prioritises the inclusion of marginalised communities, of people living with disability, and of course, women's empowerment. And so we have key projects that promote gender equality and women's empowerment, but we mainstream social inclusion across every single activity that we are involved in here.
Are you collaborating with some kind of organization or an NGOs to work in a more impactful manner for that?
Yeah, so as I said, with subnational governance, we work with the Asia Foundation. In climate change, we work with ICIMOD, one of the regional organisations focused on climate change. But we also work with around 12 NGO partners across all sectors, including health, including education, including disability inclusion, agriculture, livelihoods. We work with those partners across the length and breadth of the country.
How does Australia Embassy promote cultural actions between Australia and Nepal?
Well, we do this in a number of ways. We have a cultural diplomacy program and a public diplomacy program. And so we are supporting discrete projects that promote cultural exchange between the countries. But for the next Kathmandu Triennale, which will be held in early 2026, there is an Australian curator who is co-curating that very important art exhibition. And she's working with her Nepali co-curator to bring together a really beautiful exhibition that will be world-class and will attract artists globally. But we also work on restoring stolen arts from Nepal. And we returned to Nepal the first artefact, a 13th century tudal from a temple in Patan, from Ratnashwar Temple. That came back from the Art Gallery of New South Wales during our Assistant Foreign Minister's visit in May last year. And I was so delighted to see this 13th century artefact return to the local community because it had been stolen from Nepal back in the 1970s. It found its way to Australia and we were determined that it should come back to its rightful owners here in Nepal.
Your Excellency, climate change is a critical issue for both countries, Australia and Nepal, collaborating to address environmental changes, particularly in the context of Nepal's vulnerability to climate-related disaster.
So we join with Nepal in global forums, in regional forums, and also at the bilateral level to promote climate resilience, but also to advocate for appropriate measures to address climate change.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of activity and a lot of collaboration through international organisations, through the UN, through regional organisations like ICIMOD, but also working at the grassroots level to ensure that we're working with local communities to promote climate resilience and to support them to adapt to climate change here in Nepal.
Both Australia and Nepal are a member of various international organizations. How do the two countries collaborate on global challenges such as peacekeeping, global health, and sustainable development?
So Australia and Nepal have very well aligned approaches to multilateral issues and to those issues that you've just identified. And so we do work closely in multilateral fora. I use as an example most recently the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Both Australia and Nepal have members on the committee. Both of them recently went to be re-elected to CEDAW, as this organisation is known. We had a joint, or what's called a reciprocal voting arrangement. Australia voted for Nepal's candidate and Nepal voted for Australia's. And I'm pleased to say that at those elections on the 7th of June, both Nepal's candidate Bandana Rana was re-elected for a third time and Australia's candidate Natasha Stott Despoja was re-elected for a second time. We work very much in lockstep, two countries with similar approaches, similar concerns, working closely and collaboratively together.
InfoPlus Himalaya Television has launched Journey to Australia season and already completed season 6. And credit goes to Australian Embassy and Australian government. And this wouldn't be possible without your support, Your Excellency. We are planning to launch a similar kind of series in 2024. Would you like to say something on this regard?
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to hear that you will be launching another series of this very important, informative series that targets students and their families and tells them about Australia. I can't emphasise enough the importance of any person travelling to Australia, whether that's a student or a general visitor, that they know about Australia, that they go well prepared, especially students, that they understand the lifestyle, they understand the challenges and the opportunities. Your series, Journey to Australia, plays a critical role in keeping students well informed. And so I thank Himalayan Television for making this available to so many people in the country. It means that they have good quality experiences when they go to Australia because they know what to expect. So thank you.
Finally, what is a vision for the future of Australia to Nepal relationship in coming years, in next decades? And what are the key areas do you think will define the partnership moving forward in coming days?
I'm confident that our bilateral relationship will just keep flourishing. It will continue to grow from strength to strength. I hope to see significant growth in the commercial relationship in two-way trade. I hope that we will continue to demonstrate close cooperation in important international spaces. As the world faces a particularly challenging time, it's important that vibrant democracies like Australia and Nepal work together towards peace and towards common good and common prosperity. I know our relationship will continue to be characterised by a deep friendship, by great respect, and by an extraordinary partnership. I look forward to watching this into the future. I hope that in some small way I've made a contribution to that during my tenure here, and certainly I look forward to coming back to Nepal and seeing the ways in which our two countries are working even more closely together.
Would you like to give some message to our viewers, especially to the youths?
I would love to. I would like to say to Nepali youth that Nepal is an extraordinary country, a country with great opportunity, and I hope that Nepali youth who may want to travel to Australia to get a good education, to have some work experience, develop professional networks, I implore them to come back to Nepal, to come back with all of that experience, to contribute to Nepal's development, to recognise the opportunity here, and to understand how much Nepal is respected and loved by people around the world. Certainly, I count myself in that group. I look forward to coming back here, and I look forward to seeing Nepal's youth thriving and making sure that Nepal grows into a really strong, really healthy, global leading country.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your time. It's been a great pleasure to share important topics with you. Namaste.
Namaste, and thank you so much.
Ambassador Felicity Volk, it has been an honor to have you on the show today. Your insight into the thriving relationship between Australia and Nepal has been truly enlightening. We greatly appreciate your dedication to enhancing bilateral ties and fostering collaboration across various sectors in Nepal. As we conclude, it's clear that the bond between our nation is built on mutual respect, shared values, and commitment to progress and development. Your efforts in promoting cultural exchange, education opportunities, and economic partnerships are commendable and will undoubtedly continue to strengthen the friendship between Australia and Nepal. Thank you once again for joining us and sharing your valuable perspectives. We wish you continued success in your diplomatic endeavors. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in to this special episode of Info Plus. Stay tuned for more conversation that brings the world closer together. Namaste and keep watching Info Plus on Himalaya Television.
Info Plus for genuine information.